It's Town Planner Bill Nemser coming at you with another edition of Planning, Zoning, Rock and Rolling, your number one planning and zoning radio show in the country. Actually, we're the only planning and zoning radio show in the country. We're also the number one radio show at Maynard High School, home of the Tigers. Anyway, this is the season finale, and for this episode, we've got some very special guests coming, and I think we're going to have a theme that runs throughout our musical interludes as well. I've had the pleasure to work with today's guests for the past couple of years and really learned quite a bit about a subject I knew not too much about, although I guess I did have a little background in it, which maybe we'll talk about later. But my guest today is Fire Chief Anthony Stowers, and he is the Fire Chief at Maynard Fire Department. He's a fire service professional with 25 years of experience in both career and combination fire department. Well, before we get any further, Chief, let's talk about that. What does that mean, both career and combination fire department?
Well, first, actually, I'm getting ready to start my 29th year next month.
You've got to update the information on the web.
I got to update the information. Basically, Maynard is the fourth municipality that I work for. Combination departments are departments that have both career personnel and volunteer or on-call personnel.
Oh, okay.
Maynard is kind of a combination department. We're trying to reestablish our call ranks. So that's considered a combination department.
Wow. Well, I interrupted your introductions to find that out, but we learned something already. Planning, zoning, rock and rolling. And let's see, to pronounce the name, I've heard it pronounced all different ways. How do you like your name pronounced?
Stowers.
It's Stowers. That was right. Okay, not Stowers.
Nope.
Stowers. Not like the town.
Nope,
Stowers.
it's Stowers.
Okay,
Correct.
so we're right. Okay. Some people are not pronouncing that correctly. I don't want to give names out, but I've heard that. Okay, so you've been here at Maynard since 2012. And so right now you're responsible for the overall management of the fire department. 4 platoons of firefighters and captains. How many people is that?
Well, there's 1 captain and 4 firefighters for each platoon. And like you said, we have 4 platoons.
So I'm not good at math. That's like 120? Oh, okay. 20, all right. And responsible for developing and managing budgeting, providing guidance and support to shift commanders and so on. This is quite a lot of stuff you guys do there. Actually, it's too much stuff to read because valuable radio time. This is our last episode, so we're going to cut right to your education here, which is quite impressive too. National Fire Academy, Executive Fire Officer, Leadership, 1989 to 2013. Southern New Hampshire University, Master of Science in Organizational Leadership. That's good, probably handy in this job. And from Granite State College. Okay, fire emergency management. So this has been, you knew where you were going to go as soon as you got in college.
Well, that was done, a lot of that was done after I got into the fire service with night school and things like that. But yeah, my father was a firefighter, so I'm second generation firefighter. And so I had a pretty good idea when I was younger what I wanted to do. So this has led me to where I am now. Worked
out well. Yes. And Maynard. So how did you end up in Maynard? I mean, you've got all this experience and everything, and it's Maynard's fire departments everywhere. Why Maynard?
There is. Back in 2011, the Maynard Fire Department advertised, and because of the size of the department and the community makeup, I thought it would be a good fit for me. So I applied for it at that time. I was eligible for retirement up in New Hampshire. So when I was appointed down here in Maynard, after going through the process, I retired from New Hampshire and came down here.
You couldn't retire and just sit around, though, right?
No,
I mean, what are you going to do?
That's,
come on.
Yeah,
you're a young guy.
Had to have a plan, and that was the plan. So
yeah.
It worked out very well. I think it's been a good fit. It's been a good fit for me, and they haven't thrown me out yet, so I guess it's been
true.
A pretty good fit for the town.
Every time I think about retirement, every time, like a 3-day weekend, I'm like, this is what it'd be like. I'm like, I don't know. I can't quite do it.
Yeah.
Just kidding, for those at home. Well, that's super. You certainly had a direction. Nobody could say that. I got to tell you, what was this firefighting academy? That was a 4-year school?
The National Fire Academy, the EFO program is a 4-year program. You go for 2 weeks at a time, and within 6 months of your completion of the 2-week program, you have to write an applied research paper. So it's pretty strenuous. It wasn't easy to do, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I can see. I got to tell you, when I was in the Coast Guard, as we used to call it, Uncle Sam's Confused Group, for 5 years or so, and they sent me to firefighting school. And why, I don't know. But it was terrifying. I mean, we did it on they had these mock ships that were built up, these big iron ships, and they threw us in. Now this was as I creep up on middle age, this equipment, looking back, may not be the most modern. But then they used to have these OBAs or something, or oxygen breathing apparatus and stuff, and they would put us in these horrible situations. You go in and you couldn't see anything, and it was one of the scariest things I ever did. So I can imagine doing it on a day in, day out basis. Of course, being on a ship probably is a little creepy in itself too when it's
A
on
little
fire.
more confining, I would think, than what we're used to. Most of our fires are in structures. We don't have as many fires as we used to, and part of that is because we've gotten pretty good at fire prevention. Over the past 40 years, the fire service has embraced that and worked with local communities and state agencies to develop pretty good fire safety laws and inspection programs. So fires are down, but that's really, we're still busy. We're doing other things.
I've had a few mishaps myself with my barbecue grill and inside the house, but other than that, no, I don't. Luckily, it seems fires have gone down. I don't. Is part of this due, like you say, it's to education? I noticed I was reading on your website and it talked about fire education and prevention. That's kind of a broad term. When we say fire education, who do you work with? Like the kids at school, and then go all the way up?
We work a lot with the kids in school. We have a program that's called SAFE, and that is a grant-funded program through the State Fire Marshal's Office, where we are allotted funds based on the size of our community. And we have certain safe educators that go into the classrooms, and they hit various classrooms throughout the year. And what they do is they give the kids a basic education on what to do in the case of a fire, what they should be doing in their homes as far as smoke detectors and having their parents check them.
Well, if it's kids, you got to probably tell them not to start it in the first
Well,
place, right?
that's true too.
Okay.
And then at the end of the year, each kid is given a test to see what they learned, and that's how we measure the success of the program. In the last couple years, they've added Senior Safe, which is a program that is geared towards our older adults. We don't like to say senior citizens; we like to say older adults. Oh. And that program is the same theory. Obviously, there's different topics that we talk about with our older adults. And one of the main things that we talk about with older adults is safety around the stove, the 3-foot rule, slip, trip, and fall hazards in the home, and things like that. So those are the
so it goes beyond fire,
Yeah.
slip, trip, and fall.
Those are the two main programs that we do. But it's not uncommon for us to go into a business and talk to them about fire safety or what they can do to improve, or on their fire extinguisher training or CPR training. So we do a lot. The main crux is the little children and our older adults.
That makes sense. That's paid off. And now, are there still 4 types of fire? I remember there was like an Alpha fire, a Bravo fire, a Charlie, and
Yep.
what was the other one? A Delta.
Delta, yeah. Class A is ordinary combustibles like paper or wood. Class
Right.
B is petroleum products like gasoline or oil. C is electrical fires. And then D is metals. We don't see too many metals anymore that are, well, they're still out there, but it's not as common a problem as it used to be. A lot of times you'd see engine blocks in, certain cars.
Helicopter crash was where I was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are combustible metals, and they need special chemicals to put them out.
So one of the cool things when you work for an agency like this, or a fire department, or anything, is you get some really neat toys and some equipment. And I would imagine in a fire department, you must have no pun intended, a truckload. And so why don't you tell us about some of the equipment that you've got, and what's on hand normally that's people would be interested in? I mean, I remember you have a Dalmatian?
No, we don't have a Dalmatian.
Okay, all right. That's the only thing I know.
One of the problems with that is and the reason I bring this up is because the first department I worked for, we did have a Dalmatian.
Really?
But the problem with that is you have a constant change of groups, and when you have 3 or 4 groups, the dog really doesn't know who to respond to, and the dog really struggled with that.
Really?
So we found that it wasn't a good environment.
Planning, zoning, rock and rolling, you learn it all, and now we know Dalmatians are not the ideal dog for a firehouse. Anyway, so what kind of equipment do you have over there? And I tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you have right now.
Okay, right now we have we keep 2 engines in service. Now, an engine is basically, it's the original transformer. It's a truck that rolls down the road, and when you get to the scene, you put it in pump. So the whole entire drivetrain and the engine itself becomes a giant pump. And the 2 that we have right now that we keep in service. One is a 1,250 gallon a minute pump. The other one is a 1,500 gallon a minute pump. So what that means is we pull giant hose lines off and we pump water through those. We can pump up to 1,500 gallons a minute with our largest pump. Each one of those is also filled with all kinds of equipment, from chainsaws to medical equipment to gas detection equipment to thermal imaging cameras and SCBAs. So they each have their own specialized
and a what?
equipment on.
What was the last one?
SCBA, which is self-contained breathing apparatus,
Oh,
which
okay.
is similar to what you were talking about in the Coast Guard.
It's a dinosaur in my age.
So what a self-contained breathing apparatus does is it gives a firefighter a supply of air on their back when they go into a building fire.
Yeah.
Building fires are like you mentioned before, you can't see, you can't breathe. So we carry air on our backs, not oxygen. People think it's an oxygen tank. It's not, it's an air tank. So those are on each one of our apparatus as well. The other major piece of equipment we have is our aerial ladder, which is 96 feet.
Ooh, that's a tall one.
It's a tall one, right? So we use that to gain access to upper floors of a building, such as something that you would see over at the mill, or some of the apartment buildings in town, or access to the roof. The problem with our aerial ladder is it's getting very long in the tooth. It was built before quite a few of my firefighters were born, so we are looking to replace that in the next few years.
Really?
It's over 30 years old now, which is very, very old for a piece of fire apparatus. However, one of the problems that we have is the size of our building really restricts what we can get, which is one of the reasons it hasn't been replaced yet. That piece of equipment was actually custom built to fit inside the firehouse back in 1985. It was the first one ever built in New England. So
No kidding.
yeah, I mean, it's a nice piece of equipment, but like anything, it's become outdated, and we need to replace that in the next few years.
Wow. So and is there anything new coming? Any new equipment or?
Not right now. We did get some new equipment recently. The SCBA's that we have, we had actually purchased those on a federal grant. We were awarded a federal grant last year
Nice.
for $176,000, and that replaced all of our SCBA's, so they're less than a year old now. We were able to purchase some other equipment with some the funding that we had, like a new thermal imaging camera, which I don't know if you know how those work, but that measures temperature differentials inside of a structure. So if we go into a building and somebody says, "Oh, I could smell smoke, but I don't see anything," we can use that and look at different points in a wall, for example, and see if there's heat behind there.
Really?
So yeah, they're very good for rescues as well, because you can see the signature of a human body if it's throwing off heat compared to the heat around it. So it's a very interesting piece of equipment, and it's really become a necessity in the fire service, even though they're only about 15 to 20 years old.
Wow. Planning, zoning, rock and rolling. Here, Town Planner Bill Nemser with Fire Chief Anthony Stowers. You a music fan? Because this is planning, zoning, rock and rolling,
Yeah, I am a music fan. Yep.
What kind of stuff you like?
I like classic rock.
You're in the right place.
Yeah,
How about a little Jimi Hendrix?
absolutely.
Wow, gotta love Jimmy. He was on fire, wasn't he?
He
He actually
certainly
did
was.
set fire to his guitar.
Yes, he did. That's
Yeah,
right.
I don't know if we could do that nowadays.
No, that's a violation of the fire code.
You frown on that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's go into a little bit more about the direction that the fire department is heading. Now, for one thing, a lot of people asked me about. Well, a lot of people, 2 people asked me about, and I was curious. Was when there is a fire, how do you decide if other communities are going to assist, or what is the kind of the threshold where all of a sudden, you're going to go to somebody else or they're going to come to you, and how does that work?
That's a great question. We actually have 2 layers of responses. One is called automatic aid, and the other one's called mutual aid. So the automatic aid is something that we employ when we have target hazards in our community, and other communities do the same thing. For example, if we had a reported building fire at the mill yard, that would enlist automatic aid. So we would get an engine from Sudbury and an automatic ladder from Acton.
Because of the location.
Because of the location and the target hazard. And what that does is it allows us to put more firefighters on the scene of a fire within a shorter period of time. Now, a lot of times that's not necessarily needed, but we have that in place in case there is something there. that turns into a bigger problem than we thought. And we do the same thing with other communities. Like we go to certain places in Acton on automatic response. If they have a reported building fire on Knox Trail, for example,
On what, Knox Trail?
Knox Trail,
Right.
we're automatic response there. Same thing in Stowe. Mutual aid is a little different in that if we get to the scene of an emergency and we need extra resources that we can't initially handle, then we invoke our run cards and we call mutual aid. So that's done on alarm assignments. So a typical first alarm assignment will get us 2 engines and a ladder. So we have mutual aid assignments up to 10 alarms. So we would have the ability to bring, 20, 25 engines here over a period of time and probably 8 or 9 ladder trucks. So that's how it works. It builds on itself. And it's basically, it's like a circle. It's like a ripple when you throw a rock into a pond and it ripples out. Well, we do the same thing with mutual aid. So we pull our closest communities in first, and then as the fire grows and we need more resources, we work to the communities all the way out.
How often does something like that happen? I mean, like in Maynard, how many times is this?
Well, we had a 2-alarm fire about a week and a half ago.
Saw that. Yeah.
So that brought about 6 or 7 communities in to help us out, including communities that cover the fire station, because when our personnel is tied up at a fire, we can't respond to other emergencies in town. We bring people in to cover. The chances of us going to 10 alarms, hopefully, are very slim.
Yeah,
It does happen now and then. We haven't had one here, at least not since I've been here, but it does happen periodically.
So that's wow. Well, that's interesting. Well, now going along into, let's talk about the big tuna here, the firehouse. I understand that there's been discussions now for quite a while about moving the firehouse. And our firehouse, I mean, you can tell the audience at home a little bit about it, but I mean, most people probably know where it is. It wasn't designed as a firehouse originally, right?
Well, it was designed as a firehouse. It was actually originally designed as a fire and police station.
Oh, okay. All right.
But keep in mind that it was actually built in 1954 and opened in 55, I believe. So, there's a couple differences between what we do now and what we did back
Oh, yeah.
then.
People were smaller too, they say.
People were smaller.
yeah.
The apparatus was certainly smaller. And, we weren't running an ambulance then either. So there was a lot less equipment that had to go into the building.
I see. So now you're looking to find a new home. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we one of the things that we did is we received funding through last year's annual town meeting to hire an architectural firm to do a feasibility study. And the main charge of that feasibility study was to see if we could actually renovate and add on to our existing structure. They worked for a few months on that, and it became pretty clear that was going to be a tall order. Part of the reason for that was the building is in rough shape. It's 60 years old, and when you do a renovation on the magnitude that we're looking at, it basically had to be gutted and rebuilt from the inside out.
And you don't know what you'll find when you're in there.
Well, that's
I mean,
true.
materials
They
and-
don't. I mean, they had engineers come in from different disciplines, and they had a pretty good idea with what they were going to find. But one of the things that we ran into was the hazardous materials that's actually in the sealant that's used on the foundation. One of the problems with that is when you do the renovation of that magnitude, that stuff has to be removed from the building. In order to do that, they were going to want to have to build a moat around the building. We would have to have a temporary fire station somewhere in Maynard for the period of time that was going to take to complete that task.
My
That's
luck
pretty
would probably
hard
end
to do.
up being my office. It's a moat around the.
Yeah, pretty much a moat around the building to get access to the foundation. So
Wow. So it was now. So at that point, and it's on a pretty small piece of land.
yeah, it's about 0.6 of an acre.
So I mean, based on the renovation costs, the size of the land, it doesn't seem particularly pragmatic.
No, it really wasn't. But we were going to have to acquire neighboring properties, which we had a very good relationship with those property owners, and we were working toward that end. But when you combine the renovation cost and then the new construction cost in the area have skyrocketed in the last few years, it really looked to us that it wasn't a feasible option. It wasn't the best option out there. So we kind of changed the focus to look at doing something at Town Hall here. And, of course, that brings other problems like where do you put Town Hall? So right now what we've done is, at the direction of the Board of Selectmen, we've formed a fire station building committee. And the main charge of that committee is to find a suitable location for the fire station, as well as look at some funding ideas. So that's where we're at now.
So there's a committee actively.
Yes, we've
Look
had
at
two
what's
meetings.
happening.
Yep, two
Right.
meetings right now. We have another meeting scheduled for next Thursday. And again, we're looking at different options for a fire station location. One of the things that we've done is we're trying to gauge any interest out there from business owners or property owners in Maynard that might be willing to sell a piece of property to the town for the purposes of building a fire station. So if anybody out there in Radio Land is willing to do that or interested in doing that, they can get the information by contacting Assistant Town Administrator Andrew Scribner McLean.
Yes, Andrew Scribner McLean. He actually sponsors the prize on this program a little later. That if you're lucky, you'll win it from him. But so right now, I mean, is it imminent that there's going to be is it something that we're talking a year out, 10 years out? What?
Well, we originally were looking to try to do something next year, but at this point, because of the costs associated with it and the fact that we don't even have a formal location and a formal plan done yet, it's not looking like something that's going to happen within the next year.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, we do need to get something done. The fire station is deteriorating at a rapid rate, and I already mentioned the space constraints, so it should be a priority for us.
Are there geographical locations that you prefer? Like, for example, I mean, the town isn't that big, but I mean, are there like areas that you want, or that you had something that was available and you opted not to go, or anything like that?
Well, back in 2008, 2009, that was before I got here, but they were looking at building a fire station on Rockland Ave, and that every now and then that comes up, and people say, well, why can't we build it on Rockland Ave? Well, there's a couple of reasons. We could build it on Rockland Ave. I can't say that we couldn't do that, but it's not a particularly good location for a number of reasons. One is it's not located near the geographic center of the community. And you are absolutely right. We are a small community, and response times would not be unreasonable, but they would be much longer than they are now, going from Rockland Ave to certain parts of our community. But the other thing is you'd have to do some significant upgrades to the intersections at Rockland Ave and Acton Street, and then Acton and Brown Street. So, there is a cost there, and there's not necessarily any savings. So the reason that location was looked at back, a few years ago was because the town at the time was applying for a federal grant. And part of the stipulation in that grant was that you had to have a shovel-ready project, which means that you had to have a location to do it. The town owned that property, so it was considered shovel-ready. And in a case like that, where the federal government was going to pay a large chunk of the cost of building a fire station, you can certainly make exceptions like location. But in a perfect world, that really isn't a great location. We'd like something closer to where we are now, somewhere in the geographic center of the community or thereabouts. It has to be large enough so that we can put the building on there. We're looking at about a minimum of an acre. So that's difficult in Maynard because, like you said, it is a small community. But ultimately, that's what we're looking for, something in the downtown area, about an acre.
Wow. So 1 acre. Well, 1 acre would do it, really? Would that be ideal? I mean, if you had your choice, would that be size?
You'd like to have it a little bit bigger than that, but I mean, minimum of an acre should give us what we need. I mean, we're not looking for anything extravagant. We're going to build the minimum of what we need to suit the needs of the community.
I see. Well, okay. I also just, this is a real-time show, and I just found that our ace producer, Johnny G, for our season finale, will not be here today. He's waiting at the studio for us, but... oh, well, see, I have to run my own board, but so far so good. It's not quite as fun. Oh, and a little live kiss, which we haven't heard since I was in high school. That's from 1976, and as you may guess, the title of that tune was Firehouse. Planning, zoning, rock and rolling here with town planner Bill Nemser, and my guest today is Fire Chief Anthony Stowers. Do you like Anthony or Tony? That's another thing I never got straight. I've heard it both ways. What do you?
It doesn't really matter. I usually go by Tony with people I like, but you can call me Anthony, Bill.
Oh, ouch.
Just
ouch.
kidding.
Come
Just
on.
kidding.
We have a lot of friends on this show here. And, the best way to lose them, as I found out, is sometimes, you got to separate business and social life. And I have to do things like inspections and issue permits and things like this. And sometimes people get a little irritated. But, I mean, in the end, they realize, of course, it's your job and so on. But inspections are part of a lot of jobs and professional responsibilities. Now, I'm certain the fire department, well, I say I'm certain. Of course I know it because I work with you at times. But the fire department does a lot of different types of inspections. I mean, probably a lot more than I would even consider. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of inspections the fire department does, what they're for, and who really is responsible for scheduling them or how they get scheduled?
Okay, that's a good question. Probably the most common well, it is the most common inspection we do is called what we call a 26F, and that is a smoke and carbon monoxide detector inspection on a house that's being sold. So every time a house in the community is sold, we go into that home and we test the smoke detectors and the carbon monoxide detectors to make sure that they work. Now the requirements for those are kind of funky because they're based on the age of the home. So there's certain requirements that say a house that was built in 2010 would have, as opposed to a house that was built in 2005 or even 1960. So it depends on the age of the home. Some of the other inspections that we do are oil burner inspections. If there's been a new
oil burner?
Yep, oil burner. Gas burners,
Right.
oil tanks, gas tanks, anything underground. If it's being put into the ground like a propane tank, we have to inspect it. If it's an oil tank that's being removed from the ground, we have to inspect that. That's a DEP law, but we unfortunately are the ones that have to enforce that. We do inspections for our nightclubs or any place that serves alcohol every year. One of the inspections that they have to have is from the fire department in order to renew their occupancy permit and their liquor license. So that is just basically a safety inspection to make sure that the fire alarm system's working, the smoke detectors are operable, the fire extinguishers are where they need to be, exit signs are lit, and so on. So we do a lot of those in the fall. We also do pre-fire plans, which is where we go into a building and we try to get as much information on that building as we can so that if there is an emergency, we have that in an electronic database. We can access it and make sure that if there's a problem in that building, we're better equipped to handle it.
It is planning, zoning, rock and rolling with the talking heads and burning down the house. I am Maynard Town Planner Bill Nemser, and my guest today is Maynard Fire Chief Anthony Stowers, and he's going to be with us for a little bit longer. Actually, I hope for a long time longer because he's about my age.
Building as we can so that if there is an emergency, we have that in an electronic database. We can access it and make sure that if there's a problem in that building, we're better equipped to handle it. The other thing that we do is we do a safety survey. So we'll go into a business and do a safety survey or an inspection on that and give them recommendations on how they can improve their facility to make sure that they're complying with not only state and federal laws and standards, but also to keep their insurance company happy.
Wow, that's a lot. I was going to ask you about DEP because I figured if you're removing tanks from underground and things like this, I mean, there's a million types of catastrophes that could happen. Not the least of which would be some sort of environmental degradation. But do you? I mean, I always wondered about that. When you have like a gas station or something like that that's doesn't exist anymore, that's out of business. Does somebody have to monitor that they take the tanks out from underground there? I mean, or are they just sitting there really until somebody wants to do something with it?
Well, in some cases, they might be abandoned. They might be still in the ground. We don't know. But when something's removed, there's a permit process that's involved. And, of course, there's a permit for everything these days. We know that. But there's a permit process that's involved that gets us to go out and actually inspect and make sure that there's no environmental damage. So if somebody pulls a tank out, we can look in there and see if there's been any leakage or if there's any long-term soil discoloration. We can even monitor the soil to make sure that there's no petroleum products in it. But as far as abandoned structures, we're hoping that they're out, but it's very difficult to say that for sure.
I wonder that because as metropolitan Boston becomes more and more built up, and as a planner, one of the things that we're always trying to do is infill, and redevelop existing sites and that. But there's always, what are the challenges with the redevelopment of a site, particularly in a densely populated area, is that you never know what you're going to run into with contaminants, with what's underground, and you get. So you're fooled sometimes because you think, oh, well, I'll just take the building down and I'll just build a new one, and it's not always that simple. And I was just curious about that. There must be something right now in the community's closer to downtown Boston, I can only imagine what they're finding there and the remediation processes they have to go through. That's a hard word, remediation
Well,
processes.
and that's a common question that we get from people that are looking to purchase homes in the town or purchase a building to renovate it or tear it down or whatever, is do we have a record of an underground tank there? And, to be honest with you, town records back many years ago were not as good as they are now. So sometimes we have a record of it, sometimes we don't. And if we don't have a record of it, we tell the people, look, we don't have a record that there's a tank even there. There's no record that the tank was removed. So you're on your own.
I should point out at this point, this interview is being conducted in the pristine planning offices right here, where everything is properly cataloged and in order. So, but it was before Bill and before Chief Stowers. But so in that case, is it something that environmental remediation is something that somebody would check with the fire department with? To start when they're doing any project like that? I'm thinking more of the lines of a homeowner. Is it something? Where would they start for that?
Well, typically, like I said, they'll start with us, and if we don't have a record of it, then they can look through county records or even records here at town hall and see if there's any record of it. But if we don't have a record of it, there's a pretty good chance that no one does. So.
And then what?
Well, then they take their chances, and what they'll do is, at closing, they'll tell their financial institution or whatever that, look, there's no record of hazardous materials here, because that's one of the questions that people get asked at closings is there any hazardous materials on the property?
Yeah.
Well, if you don't know, you don't know.
Well, as you can probably gather from my line of questioning, I own a very old house, and I found some very peculiar things recently while I'm trying to do some renovations. And there are things that I don't recognize, I have to say, and I don't know who to call. But that's good to know. So maybe I'll just call the fire department and say,
There you go.
Yeah, can I use your name?
Sure.
And anyway, I'd like to thank Chief Stowers for taking the time out of his busy schedule to come spend a little time with Planning, Zoning, Rock and Rolling. I hope all of you out there enjoyed that. And this is going to be the season finale, and we won't be around again until fall. But I hope everybody enjoyed the show, and we're going to be archived on the WAVN website, so you can pull up any episodes if you feel the need to tune in and kind of catch up on some things. So I feel like a kid in school again and going on summer break from the show. But over the summer, feel free to contact me. As a matter of fact, please do contact me and let me know any topics you'd like to hear discussed when the show resumes in the fall, and particularly any guests, because we've been very fortunate. We've had quite a number of really interesting guests that have come on this year, and I think that everybody has actually enjoyed their time here. I really have a special thanks I'd like to give to Johnny G and Matt for producing this show for the last 2 years. They've been wonderful. They're off to school, and wish them nothing but the best. I will absolutely miss them. And also thanks to Mark Menazin for giving us the time and latitude to do a show like this and allowing us to come up with our own format. And lastly, I'd like to thank all the guests for making this just a great season. Town Planner Bill Nemser here with Planning, Zoning, Rock and Rolling. This is the season finale, and we're just down to our last few minutes on the air. I hope that all of you plan on tuning in the fall and have a wonderful summer, and tune into the old episodes. Look forward to hearing from you all.